Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Torraine Walker TV. I am Torraine Walker. Thank you all for joining me today. And also, I want to thank everybody for getting me to 2,000 subscribers in less than 2 months. I appreciate you. I'm going to keep bringing y'all the work y'all like, and I'm going to keep having really fire shows. So thank you for that. On Monday, a young woman who claims to be a counselor made a TikTok video addressing the mental health of Black boys. The video sparked a conversation among Black mental health professionals about the need for therapy in the Black community, especially for Black men. And while many health professionals and many mental health workers supported the video, others said the video was indicative of a mentality of pathology in mental health fields and other fields in regards to Black men that does more harm than good. And I wanted to unpack these issues with a really distinguished panel, and I'm going to introduce them now. Aaron Coleman is a licensed family therapist working in private practice, primarily with the Black community in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Christian Lassine from Memphis, Tennessee, is a recent graduate of Tennessee State University, where he earned a master's in social work. He currently serves as a youth clinical therapist in Youth Opportunities Bledsoe Youth Academy. So, Aaron, how are you? And Christian, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
I'm pretty good. I can't complain.
All right, all right. And Aaron, apologize for butchering your name at first. I was doing too much.
You fine. You fine.
All right. The video. Let's talk about it. Was there any validity in the young woman's video, or do you think it was a case of delivery over message? And Aaron, I'll start with you.
Um, I think I understood the point. I think I understood what she was trying to say about, like what the experience is for like women who are interacting with the Black males that she was speaking of. I think I understood that part, but I think that her delivery came more off as like she was kind of shaming or pointing the fingers. And I just think that there's a better way to deliver the message at hand for sure.
All right, Christian, what are your thoughts?
First of all, I definitely have to agree because like that just was it just seemed so personal more than just delivering a message, And you know, especially doing therapy, I would say definitely keep it from personal, but it was just bashing and more derogatory than anything.
Okay. Do you think that there was anything valid in the video or a conversation that might have been started with that in a little bit better tone, do you think?
Um, yeah, I do think it was some valid points that she was making, but definitely went about it the wrong way.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Now, can you define what you mean by the wrong way?
The vocabulary for one, just using profane language against Black men, definitely not in a receptive way. But some Black men, I would say, do struggle with, going and admitting that they need to go to therapy. But just everybody doesn't need to go to therapy just because you can't communicate. I think that's something that you can work out with your partner instead of just like jumping to therapy. But she was like throwing that therapy out at Black men in a bashing way, as if like they just necessarily had a big problem and that they needed to go to therapy.
Aaron, I want to ask you about that because I do see a lot of that when we have these conversations about therapy with Black men. It almost seems like therapy is used as a weapon when there's some sort of situation where there's some lack of communication, either with a child or a lack of communication with a partner, or even to the point where, like, if somebody disagrees with something somebody says politically, the automatic go-to is therapy, therapy, therapy. Like it's almost like an old school. It's like a new version of the switch or something like that. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think it has a lot to do with the stigma of mental health. I think before now, mental health was seen as such a taboo topic. And if you went and saw any mental health provider, it was because you were crazy or it was because there was something that was abnormally wrong with you in your mental emotional state. And so I think that even now, like while we may not be out here, at least hopefully we're not out here still like calling people crazy to that extent, now we've just switched it up and now we're using therapy as a weapon to say like I'm not going to call you crazy, but I'm going to say that you might have something that you need to look into by saying that you need to go to therapy. So I think that it's a weapon that just kind of goes along with the stigma that we need to continue to dismantle because it's not helpful, because therapy is not always about there's something wrong with you. Sometimes it's about just bettering yourself. Sometimes it's about just maintenance. But when you look at the stigma, like just like for in general, but then also like the Black mental health stigma as well, like therapy, it's becoming more common. But I think that we as a community, like we still use it to be able to say that like, oh, this person doesn't have everything together. And that's not necessarily what therapy is for.
Okay. I want to pull up a stat really quick. According to research done by Harvard Medical School's affiliate McLean's, about 25% of Black Americans seek mental health care compared to 40% of their white counterparts. And according to the study, and according to other studies, a lot of that comes from some of the things you mentioned, the stigma around seeking out mental health, because there's this idea in the Black community that, if you're going to seek mental health, then you're already too far gone and we need to ostracize you because of that. Do you think some of these conversations that we're having around mental health and around people who are dealing with certain issues when it comes to their health or their well-being, do you think some of the conversations, some of the tone of the conversations discourage people from going to seek therapy and mental health?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that too oftentimes people don't want other people to know that they are in therapy because of the way that it's talked about. And so I know people who their closest family members don't even know that they've been in therapy for 6 months or been in therapy for a year, because of the way that it's talked about within our friend circles, within our community. It discourages people from going to therapy. I think also you have to consider things like access to health care. You have to consider things like representation in the field. Like those things also discourage people from wanting to get into therapy as well.
And Christian, what do you think about this?
I honestly think that, like Aaron said, having the access to it, and also just the idea of therapy sometimes scares people. Just, they would be sharing some things that are so sacred about themselves and their past, whether it's trauma or anything, to a person that they're, have to build trust with and have to build a connect with. And that's scary. You have to put trust into someone to actually, deliver that information to them, and that's scary.
Yeah, and that's a point I wanted to bring up too, because something in the video that really troubled me was the fact that even though the PII data might have been removed from the video, the fact that somebody who's entrusted with somebody's mental health and their well-being is going online and talking about Black men in this derogatory fashion, eventually that stuff could possibly get back to her patients. And how would that affect somebody who's entrusted this person and other people with their mental health and their well-being? That's very dangerous to me. What do you think? Christian, I'll throw it to you.
I mean, it's like, honestly, it depends on the situation as well. What is that patient going through? What if does that patient have mental health issues to the point where they have suicide urges? And what if they see that video and decide like, oh, I did all this for nothing, and are you like, I confided in you, I trusted you, and you go online to the whole internet and broadcast this, and I feel attacked. That can also, that can lead down a very dangerous road. And I feel like that was a very dangerous move that she played. I just didn't understand it.
And Aaron, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this?
I think that there's two sides to it. So there's the ethical side that like we as mental health professionals, we have to be mindful of. So it goes against all types of ethical codes for you to be able to be on social media talking about specific clients. Even if you're not using their name, the thing is that that client could be watching and now they're like, oh, she's talking about me and she's sharing it with her whole following. So that in and of itself just isn't okay. But I think to what Christian was talking about, like it's dangerous when you consider how it affects someone looking at therapy as a safe space. That's the whole point of therapy, is that it's supposed to be not only confidential, but also there's supposed to be this level of safety and security that's within the room. And so if I can't trust that my therapist is going to be able to keep those things safe and secure for me, then why would I want to give them why would I want to go back to my next session? Why would I want to give another therapist the chance? Like it kind of creates this, like, I hate to use this word, but like in therapy, we call them like small T traumas. It kind of creates this like small trauma of like, I was traumatized because my therapist didn't see what it is that I had to say as something that was valuable enough to be kept in private.
Yeah, and again, that's something else that I thought was very concerning. And just to take the focus off that one video, there
Mm.
were a lot of mental health professionals and a lot of Black mental health professionals that were supporting this video and saying that there was nothing wrong with what happened. And I think that speaks to a larger issue. And I think that is very disturbed. I think something like that could be very disheartening for somebody, man or a woman who's seeking therapy. And I also want to talk about this idea of Black misandry in a lot of industries when it comes to mental health, because you see this a lot. You see it on social media. You don't see it out into the real world, but there's a thing that happens a lot on social media and a lot of these other platforms where you see people who are Black saying hateful, derogatory things about people who could potentially be their clients or their patients. And there's no pushback from their industry about that, and there's no real repercussions about that. Christian, can you talk a little bit about that?
And I honestly like feel like they should incorporate some type of repercussion for those things. And and once you don't have no repercussion for those things, you're going to continue to keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and not taking into account how it affects the patients that you are serving.
Aaron, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that I don't know what the repercussion needs to be. I don't know what that needs to look like, but I do think that like we need to be having conversations with other people about this. The thing is that social media is here to stay. And so like there's going to be other opportunities for therapists to share their thoughts and their feelings about things. And even if it's not like on an institutional, like on a board level, then I think we as a community like of Black mental health therapists, we need to be watching out for one another, and we need to be kind of holding each other accountable to say like, hey, this is not helpful to the people that a lot of us serve. Like part of us being in this field is that we are providing a lot of representation for people who look like us. This is not helping the cause. And so if you want to share a message, we need to figure out a better way for you to do it.
Hmm. Well, let me ask this, and this is a question for both of you. Aaron, you can answer this, and then I'll throw it to Christian. Um, where did this come from? Where did this idea come from that you can say these sorts of things online? I don't know. I know it's not exactly a violation technically. Well, where did this idea come from that it's okay to say these things about people who could potentially be your clients, and nobody says anything? Because if you do this with anybody else, there's going to be problems. So where did this come from? And Aaron, I'll ask you. Where did this comfortability come from to be able to do this?
I think it's a matter of like, blurring the lines between do you want to show up on social media as yourself or as a mental health professional? Social media is a spot, like that's where anyone can say anything that they want. And right now, it's like we're in this new wave of social media where like, if you post a little video, you could get tons of followers and it'll go viral and all that, right? But when you do these things, you need to kind of keep in mind, are you showing up as a therapist or are you showing up as just a regular human being who's not wearing their licensure letters on their shirt? And I don't necessarily think that a lot of professionals are really looking at it in that way. Like, I think that they kind of just say, well, this is my platform, so I can say whatever I want to say, which is true. You can, but you need to be mindful of what details about yourself that you share, because there's a certain level of, what's the word I want to use? There is a certain level of reputation that comes when you say like, oh, these are my thoughts, my feelings, and also I am a licensed therapist in this area.
All right, Christian.
Yeah, I would say social media does play a big part in it, and and it depends on the person and what they're at, like, and how they goals align up with their passion with the job, you know. And if you have a deep enough passion to do what you have to do, then there's no way you should get on the internet and do what she did. And the way that she does it, and the way that she did it, it just went back. It just goes back to taking accountability. It goes back to taking accountability. There's no accountability in that. And she felt comfortable because it was her personal social media account. She usually go on there and she speaks how she feel, as she should, but without taking in account, without taking responsibility for what she was doing.
Hmm. I want to pull up a little bit of data again. last week in 2016, a Yale study found that Black boys are labeled difficult and targeted for harsher discipline than other ethnic groups. And this starts at the pre-K level. It basically showed that the school to prison pipeline starts for Black boys at the pre-K level much earlier than previously thought. And like I said earlier, academic, legal, and mental health professionals are on record saying hateful things about Black men and boys. There was the case of a young woman in Texas who worked for the Texas bar who called Black men bullet bags, and that went viral, and it ended up going into the news, and she shut down all her social media accounts. I don't know if she faced any repercussions. There was also a case of a professor at Princeton that said Black men categorically hate Black women, and this is a professor that teaches Africana studies. So these sort of things are prevalent in a lot of very prominent spaces and a very lot of influential spaces. And again, if you say these sorts of things about any other ethnic group, you're going to deal with some consequences. But you can say this about even Black women. If you say something about Black women, there's going to be consequences. But you can say things specifically about Black boys, and nothing happens. How can that be addressed? How do you think? Aaron?
Oh, that's actually a good question. I think that there has to be a culture shift. I think that right now in culture, what we see is that we have been able to attribute some type of positive stereotype or some type of positive characterization to every other group. But the one group that over the years we like culture has just struggled to be able to affirm has been Black men and Black boys. And so I think that there has to be a shift in culture, and we need to really deal with this negative stereotype that says that Black men or Black boys are the characterization of something bad or of something that is not worthy of praise or affirmation, which is why we need a lot more programs. We need a lot more professionals. We need a lot more community support to help to change this narrative. So that way, when these harmful stereotypes do come out, when these harmful opinions do come out, we have something to back it up. But right now, no one is answering the criticisms because they're still feeding the negative stereotype.
And Christian, what are your thoughts?
And it is exactly that. It is exactly a stereotype, and it is what expected of the Black men. That is what they go off of. They don't go by what's actually going on. They don't actually do the research to figure out why, to get to the why of why everything is going on. Does that kid have resources? What's that child's home situation? They don't take all of that into consideration before they try to judge that Black man, that young Black boy, or any Black man on what's going on in their life. You know what I'm saying? So just because they have lack of resources, they create a plethora of problems for them. Not having a stable household, that creates a list of problems. The list can go on and on and on. And that's what they judge the Black men, the Black boys off of paper, of what they expect the statistic to be, and they don't go off of what the research and the facts are.
Can you expand on that a little bit? When you say they judge Black men on paper, what does that mean?
Just when, like, let's say a child in school, for example, if they have an IEP, which is a behavior plan, that doesn't they will automatically list that child as bad, or he will be a problem in your classroom. But in reality, like, that child is acting out because he needs some love, and that he isn't getting at home. Or it could be that child missed a couple of meals, so he took an extra snack because he was hungry.
Yep.
So you're saying like the system basically pathologizes behaviors, and they don't really go into the details as to why a Black boy may be acting out, or way he's behaving in a certain way?
Most definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Aaron, in your practice, do you see these sorts of things? Do you see some of these behaviors happening when you talk to families that are dealing with young Black boys and young Black girls?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty common to see that, like whenever I've worked with Black men, like listening to them talk about how like they're judged just based off of their name. And honestly, it's not just Black men, this is Black men and women, but like that goes back to that whole what's on paper thing. Like when you read a name on a paper, unfortunately, we already have these biases, we already have these judgments. And so when we look at something, we are trying to find a way to be able to prove that our bias or that our judgment is true. And so if you already have this bias or this judgment that Black men are not, or that Black boys are bad in school, when you see a name that you think might be a Black boy, then you already start to connect the dots between, oh, well, I have a feeling that this kid might be one of my trouble kids. So we look for these things to kind of confirm our own bias. And so I think that in my experience, a lot of what I've dealt with some of my clients has been that they feel like they are already at a disadvantage when they walk in the door. They feel like they're already at a disadvantage when they turn in their application for something, or when someone has to interview them for something, because of what is on paper, that someone has already attributed a terrible value to.
Mm. You mentioned this earlier, and I want to go back to this point. Um, we live in an age of social media, and the main goal of social media is to promote yourself by any means necessary, for better or for worse. Um, it started with entertainers, and now it's expanded into every profession, from medicine to politics to pretty much anything that's front facing or public facing. What does that say about the state of professionalism when it comes to the legal field and mental health and public health fields, when the people that are responsible for the health of the public have basically embraced this idea that you have to get out here and basically make a spectacle of yourself to be taken seriously? And this is for, I'll ask Christian and then I'll swing back to Aaron.
Well, honestly, I believe is a line that you have to draw. You have to know the difference between social media and your reality. And it's okay to promote yourself on social media. But just everything doesn't have to be broadcast. This social media era, is just broadcasting everything. It's a difference between promoting yourself, and between promoting yourself and actually using it for your own personal leisure.
Hmm. And Aaron, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about social media and promotion when it comes to being professional?
I mean, I think that it is a great tool. I think that we have more people who are even open to therapy or even therapy topics now because of the way in which professionals are using social media. So I don't think that all social media is bad. I don't think that all mental health professionals, or whatever professional you ascribe to be, like, I don't feel like they are all tainting the name. I just think that we need to be more careful, and we need to know, like, what is worth, like what is your intention? Why are you sharing what you're sharing? Are you able to really communicate that intention? And also, is this helping your profession or is this hurting your profession? If you are sharing something that, I think one of the things that some of my colleagues have been talking about is that some people get on social media and they say things that, like, it's great, but also, like, they spend a whole therapy session with a client talking about that. And it's like, okay, maybe we don't need to share every single thing, kind of like what Christian said. Like, we should have some type of boundaries here to know, like, okay, this is a helpful tip and this is something that needs to be reserved for therapy, because it takes more than just a surface level understanding of what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important for people to understand too that, if you are quote unquote a professional, there's nothing wrong with being able to kick back and unwind and vent and everything. People do it all the time.
Yeah.
Whether, it used to be back in the day, it used to be you could go have at the bar and sit back and drink and talk with your colleagues and everything and do all this stuff and be able to vent. But it's like, I think because of the pandemic and because of the prevalency of social media, people feel like they can just express anything they want in front of the world. They act like they're in their living room and they're not.
Mhm.
The one thing that does concern me is the fact that even when people vent about their jobs, um, you haven't seen the level of vitriol that you've seen in the past few years when it comes to people who work in, like I said, in mental health professions or in medicine and healthcare. I mean, there's almost like an almost disrespect and disdain for the people that they have to treat, and I think that's very scary.
Yeah, yeah. If you're tired, if you're burnt out, the last thing you need to do is be on someone's social media. The last thing you need to do is be on someone's camera. And I think I mean, again, it's another issue within the field of, like, how are we teaching and training our professionals to take care of themselves? They aren't. And so what happens is they go into these fields that are rewarding in the end, but can be hard because we are sitting with people's stuff every single day. And so when you're burnt out, you have what we call compassion fatigue. And so a lot of what you see on social media is you see people who are exhausted, who have been carrying extremely heavy things, not because they don't want to, but because that's the nature of their job. But compassion fatigue has sat in to the point where they no longer have the level of empathy that they need to be able to be mindful of how their words are impacting others when it comes to social media.
Christian, how do you feel about that? It's okay to vent. Everybody does it. Everybody does it among their friends. But when you get online and do this stuff, it makes things very dangerous for you people you might be treating and for yourself. So what do you think?
Yeah, I honestly feel like you should just keep it within, your close friend area or the people that you trust within, because if that type of information is critical, and it gets out into the world, you know what I'm saying, and if you're using it in a promotion way, like Aaron said, your intention is very important. You could be using it for, some motivation, or just or as a testimony. You could be using it as a testimony, which means you have already healed and gone through this situation, which means you are comfortable enough and secure within yourself enough to discuss this situation out in the public, rather than, getting on social media, not completely healed from the situation, speaking from a like a totally different area in your mind. And that can be dangerous as well, especially having, your clients looking at that, and clients can tell. They can tell if you're, this. You can tell that this is kind of personal to them, or they're going through something. How we are. We can, very alert. Clients are very alert. Just how we study them, they're studying you as well, because they're actually putting their trust into you. So yeah, I just being mindful.
No, that's real, and that's just something that has to happen. I think that happens even in personal relationships. I think we know that. Somebody, you can be in the house with somebody and you can be thinking they're getting on my nerves, but you know not to say it out loud. It's okay to sit with your thoughts sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know. For everybody who's just tuning in, we're having a conversation about the state of Black academia and Black therapy. Just to do a little bit of house cleaning real quick. If you want to support the work and you want to support the channel, do what you can. You can run some cash through Cash App, PayPal, Patreon, or Venmo. Do what you can, and then any support you want to give to the channel to help keep these conversations going, we greatly appreciate it. I want to move on to something that some people are aware of, but they don't like to talk about. But it's a real thing that we have to discuss, and it's the prevalence of Black Stevens from Django and Black Karens in a lot of these jobs. There's a lot of people who work in these professions who really do not like Black people, and we got to be honest about that. There's a lot of people who they go through they matriculate through higher education, they get a position, they get a little bit of authority, and the first thing they do is automatically turn on people who look like them, either because they feel like the system tells them they have to do that, or they feel like that's their way to get ahead. And I think that's some of what we're seeing a little bit. You had this idea that there can only be one, and a lot of people feel like because they've achieved to a point, then everybody else got to get it the best way they can. And if you can't help me, then I can't help you. Christian, I'm gonna throw this over to you. Can you talk? Have you experienced any of that in your professional life? And can you talk a little bit about what that experience has been?
Unfortunately, yeah, I can say I have experienced, something like that. And it's just, like I said, it's just unfortunate, when you go into a workplace and you have, you're ready, to be a team player, and you're ready to put in that effort that you need to do to get the job complete, especially when you're working with a team. It's dissatisfying, just to know that you have those type of people in the workplace. And they'll never say it directly. It'll just be it'll be in the atmosphere, or it'll be like side comments, and it just, that vibe will come off so strong to where, you don't, the job isn't enjoyable anymore. And that's why, when I go on interviews, I ask how is the work environment, and I ask them to be completely honest. And it's just because that's very important to me when I go into the workplace. Like, if you can accept me for how I am as a person, how I am as an employee, and value what I bring to the job, or what anybody brings to the job, why should I continue to show interest in employment? And yeah, it's just certain people have that 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 job, that professional knowledge to just keep their personal bias away from their job, but some just not, some don't.
Aaron, your turn. Have you experienced this?
I have actually, and it was the most frustrating thing I think I'd ever experienced in the workplace. It reminds me of that, like crabs in a barrel mentality that like there can only be one at the top and everyone else has to suffer. And to me, that doesn't embody the what I believe would be like a core value of the Black community, which is support, it's empathy, it's connection, and like understand that everyone needs to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do, but you don't have to squash someone else, you don't have to pick on someone else, especially not your own kind. I feel like that's the exact opposite of what community is supposed to do. And so I agree with what Christian said, like you have to look at the culture, like you have to look at number one, who was on the team, number two, how long have they been there, number three, like what is their motivation for staying. There was an org on campus way back when I was an undergrad, and it talked a lot about one of their slogans was everybody eats. And I just feel like that is really critical. And we need that. Like we need that in our community, but like you should want that in your workplace. Like everybody needs to be able to eat. There should be equal access, or maybe I should say equitable access to everyone to be able to get what it is that they need.
No, I agree with you. And unfortunately, that's a very real thing. And I've experienced that just in my professional life. Like I said, some people know I worked in corporate media for a while, and I'm telling you, there are some Black folks who look just like us. When they see somebody else Black coming into the room, it's literally like that meme from Django Unchained where that dude Steven sitting on the porch screwing his face up because he sees a Black dude on the nag. I said Black dude, but you know what I'm talking about. Um, well, how can we? Well, let's talk about that. And how can we? Because I think that mentality filters down into the way that people treat people who need their help. When you're dealing with mental health and you're dealing with the legal field and you're dealing with medicine. What can we do to kind of like, I don't want to say force people. How can we bring people in and make people understand that just because somebody else comes in, it's not going to take anything away from you. And Christian, I'll throw that one to you.
Honestly, it can start with the training. Just incorporate that in some of the training at these jobs. Some of the problems that go on in the workforce is because of the training, and I feel like it's something that you can nip in the bud as soon as you get the training. And I feel like it goes into go deeper into teamwork, working as a team, and doing excuse me, doing or what's the word I'm looking for? Um, you know, things that make you work together. You're doing things that make you work together as a team, bonding as a team. And I feel like that has been gone out of the workplace, recently.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Aaron, what do you think? What are some ways to kind of combat that attitude, that mentality?
I definitely think that we need to increase our training and our knowledge of cultural competence and just learning. I think this helps in the workplace, but this also helps especially in the mental health field, but like learning a lot more about your own biases, learning a lot more about your current skill set and where you need to learn. And then also like, how are you using these things to be able to give the best care to other people? And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of people, this is not just in the mental health field, but like in general, who are willing to do that like self-awareness work. And you don't necessarily have to sit in front of a therapist to be able to have self-awareness, but like being able to sit there and examine yourself and examine what are your automatic thoughts and feelings about people. That right there is going to be the starting place for you to be able to serve whatever population well, especially when it comes to minority communities, because that's just what a lot of people tend to have a lot of biases around. Like you need to be able to check yourself first so you can see how this is going to impact your interaction with these people. And then if you know that it might hinder you in a certain way, then you need to go and talk to a supervisor. You need to be able to go and talk to a friend or someone who can be able to hold you accountable and how that might interact the work that you do.
Okay. I want to pull up another stat really quick. Actually, a couple of stats because speaks to the issues that African American males face and why it's important for them to get some sort of counseling sometimes, or some sort of, at least have someone they can speak to. African American males experience their sexual debut earlier than all other groups, according to the National Institute of Health. The average age for a black male to experience a sexual debut is 12 years old. Um, Black women and white women raised by low income parents, though, meaning those in the bottom 20th percentile, they have a much better chance, and they also meet similar rates of possibility of rising out of that situation and moving into generational mobility than black men, by contrast, who end up staying in the 19th. I like at least 19% of black boys never get out of generational poverty. Black men raised by low income parents face twice the risk of remaining stuck in intergenerational poverty, 38%, as opposed to black women. And I'm pulling that up because these are very dire stats. And that if you grow up in generations of that sort of poverty and that sort of psychological malnutrition, so to speak, you're right for a lot of issues and a lot of societal issues that could come your way that could seriously be detrimental to your life. It's not set in stone, but it's very hard to come out of that. And how important is it to have mental health professionals who care about that community in that community? Christian, I'll throw it to you.
It's a very critical part of, actually, accomplishing the goal of the community. You know, if you don't have people that look like the people that's in the community, then you won't have people, you won't have the right people in there that understand what those people have been through, what those people are currently going through at the moment, what obstacles that they have overcame. You have to have that and know that, not have that knowledge to understand and look at things from a different perspective other than your own, to build that connection and trust, to actually come together to accomplish that goal of whatever that goal is for the community. And it's just, if you have people coming in there and, like Aaron said, with their own biases and not being able to be self-aware of what's going on with the community, then that's what they're going to go off of. They're going to go off their own personal bias. They're going to go off of their own beliefs and values instead of taking into account what's better for the community.
And Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think that because it's generational, so because it's been passed down, somebody has to be able to call it out. So like somebody has to be able to see and hear that there is something wrong in the messages that is being passed down through generations. I would love for it to be a mental health professional. Obviously, I'm kind of biased because I am one, but I think that we also have to consider the fact that, like, part of the benefit and part of the beauty of the Black community is that there are multiple ways for us to be able to get that type of support. So, like, yes, it can come from a mental health professional who can give you some of those tips and those tools, but also it can come from any other helping professional in the community that someone is able to trust. And so I think that we have to be able to see where mental health professionals really need to be, and also where we can encourage some of this community support to kind of accomplish the same goal, because it goes into that whole aspect of trust that Christian was talking about.
Okay, Aaron, let me ask you, if black boys and black men feel they have no psychological safe spaces to deal with their trauma, and they feel demonized when they ask for help by people who look like them, what do you see as the ripple effect of that in the community?
I mean, if they can't find safety within people who look like them, I can't imagine how easy it'll be for them to find safety in general. I think that, which is probably what has happened a lot. Again, this is not all Black men. This is not every single Black boy, but I think that you have to consider, like, whatever, some people, they don't have a ground level for what they consider to be safe. Some of us do. Some of us can say, like, oh, like, if I walk into a room and I see another Black person, like, I know that it's on my side. But for these Black men and for these Black boys that you're talking about, if they can't have that, who do they have? And if they can't localize not even one person, then what we have is these individuals that are kind of like just keeping everything to themselves, which just feeds even more into this really harmful narrative that Black men don't know how to open up, that Black men don't have feelings, that they don't know how to be vulnerable with other people.
Now, Christian, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I have to say that I agree. And one thing about it is that once they run into that place of distrust and not being able to find that person, it's hard to come out of it. And once you're in that space and you feel that way, it's only going to get worse. Whatever traumatic experiences or whatever it is that they're going through, it gets worse over time because it continues to build up inside. They're not talking about it. They don't find a safe place with, they don't have anybody to have that safe space with, and then it just continues to build up, and it causes negative reactions, and dysfunctional behaviors and all types of things, and it just trickles down from generation to generation, just because it's not being taught to actually express your feelings.
All right. Well, how can we fix the state of affairs, and can it be fixed? Aaron, do you think it can be fixed?
I think it can. I think that we have to restore the safety, though. And so I think that in order for us to restore the safety, we have to show that we are a safe people, that we are a safe community. And then we also have to show that, like, in this context, like therapy is safe as well. And so, when I think about for these young Black boys, like that starts when they are in grade school. That starts like, like what mentors do they have? What role models do they have? Who can they look up to? Who can they go to as a safe place? And then once we orient them to what it feels like to be able to know that someone is safe, now we can be able to transfer that to someone else. But I think that, we have to really consider, what are we providing for them, and are we being consistent in that? Like, it's one thing to provide a safe space for someone, whether it's in therapy, whether it's in church, whether it's in the barbershop, whether it's in the community event, whatever. Like, it's one thing to be able to establish that safety once, but in order for you to be able to trust something, you need to be able to see that show up time and time again. You need that consistency. You need that intentionality. And so we have to be intentional, and we have to be consistent in how we're creating these spaces for them in order for them to be able to trust it.
All right, Christian, what do you think? Can it be fixed?
It most definitely can be fixed, but it definitely takes, like she said, would take a lot of consistency. We have to be consistent with the things that we are doing, with the things that we are passionate about. And once we get into the motion of doing that, we see results. The results is what is going to get, everybody on board with what we're doing in the community. And if we can't do that, we can't come together, and we can't, idolize one specific goal, it's not going to happen. But it takes everything that we talked about tonight. It takes everything into account to be able to accomplish that goal.
All right, I think that's where we're going to land our plane. Aaron Coleman, Christian Lassine, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for providing your insight, and thank you so much for having enough bravery to come and show up with me on this show about this.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Definitely a pleasure. No problem.
All right. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Everybody be safe. Y'all be good.